Good morning, students. Yesterday, we had finished the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of Roman Empire. Of course, there's much to the fall of Roman Empire that is not covered in this chapter. Today, we were supposed to start the Central Islamic lands, but let me make it very clear that it's extremely difficult to actually teach this chapter without the assistance of board, first of all, and the second thing being this chapter would have to be very, very interactive, and I can't do it in your absence. So probably once we start our online classes, or probably once we are actually within the class, then this chapter should be taken, because this is firstly a very interesting chapter, but also at the same time pretty complicated. It can't be done unless it's not interactive. So, jumping this chapter, we go to the next one, which is nomadic empires. Okay, so that's the chapter we start today. Now, the term nomadic empires can appear contradictory. Nomads are arguably quintessential wanderers organized in family assemblies with a relatively differentiated economic life and rudimentary, that is, basic systems of political organization. The term empire, on the other hand, carries with it a sense of material location, a stability derived from complex social and economic structures, and the governance of an extensive territorial domination, or rather dominion, through an elaborate administrative system. But the juxtapositions on which these definitions are formed may be too narrowly and ahistorically conceived. They certainly collapsed when we study some imperial formations constructed by nomadic groups. Um, Basically, what it is trying to say is the word nomadic empire itself is contradictory in the sense that nomads are supposed to be people who keep wandering and who keep loitering around. They never settle in one place. They are very restless people, and they would keep moving from one geography to another. But then the second word is empires. Now, how can you be today in Dehradun, tomorrow in Roorkee, the day after in Saharanpur, and then you would say that you have an empire? Because empire needs certain prerequisites, or a kingdom needs certain prerequisites, and it has to have complex social structures, complex administrative structure, complex political structure, and you cannot have them if you've been shifting your location every 2 days or 3 days. How would you ever be able to achieve that? So that is what they are trying to say, and that appears contradictory. But then, as we proceed in this chapter, we shall see that there have been certain exceptions of those very people who have historically been considered as nomadic people, but they have displayed amazing sense of complexity, amazing sense of adventurism, amazing sense of administrative prowess, and an amazing sense of capability, to say that's it. It's not that they have just been busy in drinking and dancing and horse riding, but they have displayed amazing sense of administrative prowess that they have shown and proved to the history. There have been quite a few. We didn't cover them. This was not there in the chapter when we were studying Roman Empire, but then definitely two very, very uh, major ones who are historically are considered to be slightly more or less on a nomadic side, which challenged the might of Roman Empire. The first one was Hannibal, who did it around 300 BC, and then the second one was Attila the Hun, who really challenged the might of Roman Empire at that point in time as well. So there have been, and of course, in this chapter we would be studying about Mongols. So it is not that they have always been kind of hunting and gathering and that kind of stuff. They have also displayed great sense of military adventurism. Like Hannibal is very, very famous for his Second Punic Wars, that is the Punic War, that is, yeah, and the war around that happened in northern Africa. So, coming to the second paragraph, he studied state formations in the Central Islamic lands, whose origins lay in the Bedouin nomadic traditions of the Arabian Peninsula. This chapter studies a different group of nomads, that is, Mongols of Central Asia, who established a transcontinental empire under the leadership of Genghis Khan, straddling Europe and Asia during the 13th and 14th centuries. Relative to the agrarian based uh, imperial formations in China, the neighboring nomads of Mongolia may have inhabited a humbler, less complex social and economic world. But the Central Asian nomadic societies were not insulated islands that were impervious, that were inert to historical change. These societies interacted, had an impact on and learnt from the larger world of which they were very much a part of. So, uh, uh, what they are trying to tell you is here, the Mongols, of course, they led a very different kind of life than the other stable societies and the other societies and the contemporary civilizations that flourished during that point in time. But Mongols showed that they were great learners, not just in the complex learning, the great complexities of administration, society, but also at the same time military warfare, but also at the same time knowing how to run empires which straddled hundreds and thousands of kilometers. So that is what we would look at in this chapter as to how they achieved it. So this chapter studies the manner in which the Mongols under Genghis Khan adapted their traditional social and political customs to create a fearsome military machine and a sophisticated method of governance. The challenge of ruling a dominion spanning a Lang of people, economies, and confessional systems meant that Mongols could not simply impose their steppe traditions over their recently annexed territories. So, essentially, what they're trying to tell you is an empire which keeps expanding at such an alarming and a rapid rate, encompassing and joining and or rather forcing to join hundreds and thousands of people from different kingdoms, different empires, and bringing them into their own main fold, naturally, they must have had a very, very efficient structure of making that possible, because that's what it is saying here in this paragraph. You could not have had for example, let's take an example for the sake. You cannot say that someone from Rajasthan, if he expands to and goes to Bihar, he tries to force the Biharis to imbibe the Rajasthani culture, and someone from Manipur comes to Tamil Nadu and wants to ensure that every Tamil starts speaking Manipuri. That doesn't work that way, right? So you would have to have the complex structures where even a Tamilian can work with you, even a Bihari can work with a Rajasthani. So these SOPs, that is the standard procedures operation, they have to be worked out. Now then that calls for enormous amount of astuteness, intelligence, and patience as well. Now this is something which you normally do not associate with the people who are nomads. You consider them to be very impulsive, very clean headed, and not at all capable of such complexities and handling such complexities. But here we would say in this chapter that Mongols did it remarkably well, and that is the reason why you have names like Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan as and firmly etched in the history books. You would always, every time you would study world history, you would always come across these names. You can never erase these names. So, coming to the next page, that is. Yes, mainly from chronicles, travelogues, and documents produced by city based literatures. These authors often produced extremely ignorant and biased reports of nomadic life. The imperial success of the Mongols, however, attracted many literati. Some of them produced travelogues of their experiences, others stayed to serve Mongol masters. These individuals came from a variety of backgrounds: Buddhist, Confucian, Christian, Turkish, and Muslim. Although not always familiar with the Mongol customs, many of them produced sympathetic accounts, even eulogies that challenged and complicated the otherwise hostile city based trade against the steppe marauders. The history of the Mongols therefore provides interesting details to question the manner in which sedentary societies usually characterized nomads as primitive barbarians. Since this, to cut it short, this paragraph is essentially saying that this is something which is not just about unique to the Mongols, but it happens all across in all the empires, whereby the court historians only write about the good things and about their rulers and their ruling families and the administration. They say that everything was great, everyone was happy, everyone was wealthy, the empire was enormously successful, the king was very benevolent, and etc. and etc. and etc. They rarely mention about the problems and the complexities which are prevalent within the empire or which could even be rampant within the empire. So you have to understand. So under these situations, the historians usually and mostly, and it has happened all the times in all the cultures, they usually rely on what has been written by the historians who have visited that empire and who have nothing to do with Mongols. They could be travelers, they could be historians of the neighboring kingdoms. Okay, and what they like, for example, we write and read and discuss a lot about Pakistan. Similarly, Pakistanis read and write a lot about Indians. We do a lot of stuff on Chinese do a lot of stuff on Indians, right? So the Chinese party and the Communist Party, then they can write whatever they want to about China, about the greatness of China, but then say about 200 years from now, 300 years from now, the historians or the contemporary historians at that point in time would be more interested in what Indians, that is, as neighbors, wrote about China, the Japanese wrote about China, or the Pakistanis wrote about China, or the Nepalese wrote about China, or even for that matter, the Russians wrote about China, or Americans wrote about China, rather than what the Chinese historians themselves wrote about themselves. Because it is normally assumed that you always toe the official line. You rarely disagree with the ruler. Do you think a court historian, had there been a court historian in, say, at any kingdom and any king, he would write anything against his king? Do you think Abul Fazl would write anything against Badshah Akbar? No, not at all. That is something which has been common to all the empires and all the rulers, and that is what is being mentioned here, that rather than the Mongol historians, the modern historians have, relied more on the accounts of what the contemporary Buddhists wrote about Mongols, or the Confucian, that is, the Chinese, wrote about them, or the Christian travelers wrote about them, because there were a lot of. You have to understand that the whole area which the Mongols controlled, the areas around China, and everything was part of the Silk Route, which ran from there, the eastern part of the whole eastern part of Asia till right till Europe. So naturally, there was a lot of movements of Christians as well, and the Christian historians, the traders, the Turkish, the Muslims, they all used to travel on these paths, and they used to visit China and the Mongol Empire and the areas of Mongol Empire. So naturally, they used to write a lot of stuff on the Mongol society, the Mongol army, the Mongol administration. So those sources are considered to be far more genuine and truthful and authentic, rather than just what Mongols have written about themselves. Okay, thank you. We shall continue.